Hello, everybody. Today is May 28th, 2024. This is weekly SIG Node meeting. Welcome, everybody. Today on agenda, I hijacked agenda first item to just remind everybody that enhancement freeze is very soon. Enhancement freeze will be June 14th. And before that, there is a production readiness freeze. It's June 6th. So basically have 1 week to get to production readiness review, and then 1 week go through that. If you have a cap and it's not listed in this list that I posted here as a query, please like speak with us, being on a GitHub issue summit. We already tracked 19 caps, and I think we will have more before the release. If you're working on a cap and it's in this list, please make sure that you have a PR, that you have assigned this PR to proper reviewers and then approvers. So yeah, please pay attention to that. Otherwise, train will go away and you'll be left alone. Any questions on cap process? If not, then next topic, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Sergey. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So I recently submitted a feature request under the Kubernetes. The feature I want to do is to add a new matrix that to record the end-to-end storage latency. It will be a gauge matrix for each pod. And under the matrix, it has the information about the pod. It helps you to locate the pod. For example, the namespace of the pod, name of the pod, well under the node name of the pod. The matrix itself, it tracks the latency it takes for pod to be created, basically the creation timestamp under the pod spec, and all the way until when the pod becomes ready. Basically, it's under the status condition ready is setting to true. With that, we can provide users insight on how long it takes for a specific pod to be up and running and ready to serve traffic. We currently have a histogram matrix, which can tell you the like under the nodes, what is the distribution, like a 99 percentile or average for each pod to be started up. But that matrix only counts from the pod creation time until the pod running time, not the ready time. So for my matrix, I want to propose to add it's a gauge matrix to count until the pod becomes ready. Yeah, that's the feature request, and I want to see if any people has any like insights here for the new matrix.
There was an effort a while ago around plumbing context through the kubelet for each pod in order to track pod latency through tracing. I think pod level tracing seems like a better fit for this sort of measurement as opposed to metrics where we have to worry about cardinality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of the reasons. Oh, sorry, Don, you want to say something?
Oh yeah, just the tracing. Yes, that's exactly I want to point out. But the problem is, I talked to David Dashpole since he lead on that effort. I think about the pod level tracing about the startup latency. On the node side, actually, it's far away. They will, based on his estimation, actually, at least more than 1 year, we can get there. And also, it's really hard to push at this stage. So I just want to say that we need to figure out, maybe we really need to figure out another mechanism for those urgent requests.
Yeah, it's one benefit of having metrics is probably tracing could also do. I'm not well of is like we can set alerts or construct a percentile over a set of a gauge metrics. And also based on my rough understanding of the event, if you want to have a pretty high level of correct events, we need to set a high level of acceptance rate, because I think currently the tracing only has like a lower number percent of accepting rate means like only X% of events we need to record, not often. Yeah. So yeah, I just want to bring anyone attention for the new feature request. And I think I also tagged the people from the SIG instrumentation to provide some insights. And also here, since most people are here from the node like SIG, like node SIG, I wanted to just ask a general questions, how people usually test their change against the Kubernetes, because I don't seem to find any instruction under the Kubernetes documentations. So any instruction will be, yeah, appreciate it.
As a general question, did we consider adding this metric, not as a metric, but as a pod status field? Because we basically want to report a number for every single pod.
Yes.
So maybe pod status field may be a good fit here.
Mm-hmm.
Did you discuss it, or do you have any preferences why it should be metric and not a pod status?
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat the questions again? Are you suggesting use other methods instead of using metrics, or?
Yeah, since you're basically trying to expose a metric for every single pod instance, and
Yes.
right now the debate will be cardinality of this metric, and it's rightfully so. Like we can spend a lot of memory to express this cardinality. At the same time, we already have pod object, and pod object already have a status. So why wouldn't we just add this number into pod status?
Yeah,
so
I think
to collect this information, you can just query.
Yeah, I see that. So regarding the cardinality, I also have some comments in the bug. One evidence for that, like one good point for that is like we currently under the kubelet, we already have some other metrics that are using the pod name as one of the metrics labeled, which means like we share the same cardinality as other existing metrics, and also KSM kubestate metrics under the pod metrics category. They all have the made manifest. Sorry, someone's typing. It was on the
Sorry, I didn't mean to distract you. I think you were actually going to say what I was typing, which was it could go on pod status as Sergey was noting, but then once it was on pod status, then maybe the Kube State Metrics project could choose or not choose to export it. But the cardinality wouldn't be surfaced from the kubelet itself.
Another note is an option. It could be, this is something we've done in Cryo, which is like you can bucket the ranges. So like we do this for counts of certain things. So do you think it would be useful if you define like, ranges of, time that exponentially grow? So as, the pod startup grows, the, it's put in a larger and larger bucket, which would allow to cover at least this case, but make sure the cardinality is constant.
Jeff, I want to hear your opinion. I personally think that's really useful. Yeah.
You mean having the buckets? Yeah, yes. I think comes down to one of my request is I can aggregate the metrics by workload, means like a deployment or a daemon set or stateful set. So means if I want to aggregate that by that, pod name is a required if I want to just group a bunch of pods together under the same workload. Yeah. But yeah, I can see the concern here is cardinality. Yeah.
I can see a point that could be made that like the cardinality of a pod name would be the same as a startup metric because, each pod has its own unique startup time. But as pods are restarted, they maintain their pod name or, I actually don't know if you keep attempts in, but it is more likely to reuse a pod name than it is to reuse a specific timestamp. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another feedback I received from David is about how long we want to keep the metrics for. Most of the pod level metrics will be active for the lifetime of the pod, but for this one, I think I would like to just keep it for a short while after the pod creation instead of keeping it forever, because if I keep the metric forever, you will make the aggregation not useful. For example, if I want to take the average, if one of the pod is deleted, and customer or users see that like an average of the start time goes up, but nothing wrong is happening in the cluster just because of the one of the pods deleted. So yeah, and I think Harsha has a question. How it's doing? Okay, the Kubernetes pod startup duration seconds is a histogram or distribution metric, but for this one, I want to propose to be like a gauge metric to tell the exact startup latency for each pod. So that's the difference.
Can you explain how that is helpful?
Yeah, so the current Kubernetes pod start duration seconds, I think it only has a few metric labels, which is like, for example, the node name as the metric labels. In that way, users could tell you, okay, what is the 99 percentile or what's the 50 percentile of the pod start latency in my cluster? And that one, and also the other thing is there's like the Kubernetes pod start duration seconds use the pod running as the final status to record the metrics. But for the new metrics I propose to add, first thing is the gauge metrics instead of a histogram or distribution, so we can tell the exact startup time for each pod. Because in my proposal, I also propose to add the pod name, namespace name, node name as the metrics labeled. And also I use the pod ready status as the status to record the metrics instead of the running. Yeah, that's the two difference.
Thanks.
Go ahead, YouTube.
Yeah, I think David also asked this in the comment, but basically, so there's nothing preventing you from using another component or setting up something else to watch this and get this information, because all you want is to record the exact ready time for each of the running pod and only keep it for that duration, and then do some higher level aggregation based on the workload information that Kubernetes doesn't have.
Yep.
So would it be reasonable to try to do this outside of Kubernetes? Just curious.
If you have any insights, I'm welcome to hear that, because I chose the Kubernetes the first time. It's just like inspired by the Kubernetes pod start duration seconds, because the piece of the code that reports the Kubernetes pod start duration seconds is under the Kubernetes the pod status monitor or pod status tracker. Means like Kubernetes will process the status of each pod whenever the pod status updates. And this is exactly what I need. Is like I need to record the metrics when the pod becomes ready. So I chose the Kubernetes because
Kubernetes actually aggregate that information, showing a histogram and trying to see at this, like you use as a metric to see if there's any significant slowdown on the node side and things like that. But it sounds like you want something to just expose a raw metric, and you want to do more on top of it. And you do have that, I guess, flexibility to watch the API and then directly manage and aggregate that. It just maybe, I don't know. It seems like there are other options as well.
Yeah, I'm just if you have any like ideas or suggestions for other places to add it other than Kubernetes, just yeah, please just make a comment in the feature request so I could take a look. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think if no other question, that's all what I have for the topic. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Jeff, for bringing it in. And yeah, everybody who had ideas, please comment on this. Post-route latency is indeed very interesting and important aspect right now, and thank you for working on that. Dawn, your topic is next.
I just put this one to share to bring this awareness, right? So the reason is David and I and Kevin, we recently have the discussing last week. We try to understand the migration story, like from the existing device plugin migrate to the DRA driver, and we want to figure out what's the plan. So during that time, these topics come up. So I know that our current the DRA API related work is all already on the open source, is in the Kubernetes SIG. And but my question is even beyond that, and because the only DRA driver when I implemented today, it is the is implemented by the patch the NVIDIA team, Kevin's team, and also Patrick's team. And I was just wondering, maybe we should start that one, even that's the vendor specific. But so far, my understanding is quite generic. And so far, all our discussing, majority discussing actually is generic. So I'm thinking about maybe we should start this from the open source. So more people, because everyone is, this is kind of one of those top our item from the community to evolve Kubernetes and from SIG Node also to support this workload shift from the info focus to the workload focus. So I'm thinking about maybe we can start from the CNCF and the Kubernetes common repo, and so more people can be participate and more people can contribute. They won't worry about this single vendor on the things. So that's kind of though I want to bring this one to the SIG Node community.
So, Dawn, are you thinking about, so there's an example driver, right? Is that what you're thinking or, yeah?
I think what Dawn, so there's the example driver and I guess the question is, do we want either in Kubernetes or in CNCF, do we want vendors to contribute their drivers? Do we want to create even a special set of repos for those drivers? Because coming from kind of the Kubernetes distributor point of view, like it would be nice if those were things that the community managed instead of individual vendors managing, like we have. That would be, I think preferable. So.
Yeah. Guess it may come down to the vendors if they're open to doing that. Definitely +1 from SIG Node. Derek.
I did mention this to Kevin. Kevin actually okay with this, but I want to just say like even like the CRI, right? So initially we also have the two containerd and the CRI. If you're really thinking about you can think about that vendor specific, but the actual management that I personally think about compared to storage vendor, actually we, at least me as the Kubernetes vendor, while another hat is not open source. Actually, I think about we did a better job than a storage vendor. Because I often, as the Kubernetes vendor, I often heard people talk about, oh, I want to have this CNI plugin. I want that that one. But for the CRI, actually, we don't have that problem. And the majority of people just go with from the OS distro. So we basically from day one and remove that confusing for our user. So this is why I brought this up. And because if you really look at the CRI, every time in SIG Node, we are always talk about how when we have the new feature, what's the story about both containerd and the CRI. So of course, this is overhead for SIG Node community from beginning, and but actually we managed that overhead to some extent, and we also have all the tests make sure there's the feature parity, all those kind of things from the SIG Node perspective, node conform perspective. So that's why I brought this one. I think about right now we bet hugely on this DRI, and this is kind of a foundation for workload shift. So, and then first, driver implemented from this is to support NVIDIA GPU, right? So how do we think about we can have like, do we think about it's necessary? This can help us accelerate and encourage more community contribution. And more from those perspectives. Yeah.
I had a question. I want to make sure I understood what was being discussed. So is the discussion topic, can hardware vendors, do they have a desire or interest in putting their code in a non-vendor specific repo? I guess that part made sense to me, and I that's just, that's not a thing that I can control, or I think necessarily, you know, any of us can control. The other thing I wasn't sure if you were saying was a way to bridge users who are using existing device plugins to a DRA world, or some type of coexistence transitionary state. Is that what you were describing, or was it the former, which was just it'd be great if DRA? Okay.
The former, it's just that migration path, it is triggered this discussing with from.
Right, so I think that, yeah, the migration path is gonna have to be done for each vendor. And we're gonna have to work, I have a future item on the work group devices agenda for discussing how we do that migration, but I don't think we're there yet for that. But I think Dawn's raising this to just say, are we open to having K-SIGs repos for each vendor, rather than each vendor doing it in their own GitHub orgs? And so it's community-owned code. Obviously, the vendor has to be up for it, right? They may not want to do it, but are we as a community up for it? Because from our point of view, that would make our lives easier.
Yeah, I'm a +1 on it. I think that makes sense. It's where I think a lot of users would naturally go. I guess the only thing, before going too deep on that +1, is like, how many of these do we think will exist, and will there be more than desired in that project or not? Yeah, I guess
Definitely cannot support more than 2, I think. Corel, we did 3, right? So we did 3.
There's gonna be like at least half a dozen, if not a dozen or more.
Totally.
Yeah.
So this is why we need upfront decided, but I think about at least we can accept the top 2 initiate this effort, and or maybe at least have the one current people working on dedicated working on, so using that as the real example instead like and like the toy example. I just want the real example there. So that's kind of things, right?
There's a bunch of hands, yeah.
I think David was up next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think makes sense to have like just +1 discussion. Makes sense to have, like, you know, the real example, you know, the driver, right, that people can relate to. I think the other thing that makes sense is like, we probably need to create some type of process, right, where and when to decide if a vendor driver should be external driver or kind of a KDS native one, right? That's part of the KDS repo. So I can imagine some new vendors coming along, right, and wanting to join. So I feel like it makes sense to define some process for that, how those can somehow graduate to be kind of, you know, Kubernetes community sponsored or something like that, drivers, right?
Yep, makes sense. Thanks, David. Yuju, do you have a still hand, or you had something to add?
Nope, still had. Sorry.
Okay, all right. Go ahead, Sasha.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because I hear confusing messages. So are we talking about one repo where all vendors contributing the drivers, or we are talking the repo under CNCF umbrella but per vendor?
I was thinking per vendor, probably. I'm not sure, John. What are your thoughts? Per vendor, I mean, per driver.
I think that's what
sense, right?
I think
per driver.
Don was suggesting per vendor. Yes, we have a sample driver, and we have an NVIDIA one, and we have an Intel one, and there's other people who have built their own custom ones that I don't know are open source, like they're just using internally. But like, you know, I think that I don't know if this needs to be like, it could be in K-SIGs, it could be in its own CNCF org. I have no idea like what the right governance organization is. But I think, Don, like the suggestion that we want them to be not just in the vendor, for the things that many Kubernetes distributions are going to want to include, I think it would simplify things to have them in the community some sort of common community foundation as opposed to
This is why I say the CNCF. I didn't mention. So basically, I just want to think about from the user perspective or vendor, Kubernetes vendor perspective. And when we start this shifting, maybe we need not like so that's why using the CII as example. I said the CII started from the vendor specific, but at the end, actually the industry just using those two. Those three, if you really think about it, there's three. This is the we start. But when we start this whole, there's more than 10. And there are more than 10. There are many people even think about it, they want to start this holiday. But we manage them very well, actually guide. And so that's why at the end, actually, we manage this kind of things is make that more standard CI and also make the user integration also easy. So it's not everyone think about I run this open source, I run this OS distro, and this CRI implementation and this. So I feel like a lot of things is run to that problem, but I hope for the DRI, maybe we can do better job. So that's kind of things.
I understand your point and understand the pain, because we had exactly the same problem in device plugins previously, where like people didn't know what some of the device plugins actually existed. The problem is what with DRA, we're supposed to have a specific logic for the devices. And even within one vendor, I can imagine with scenarios what, let's say, like our accelerators drivers will not be the same as, let's say, like network IPU drivers. So having a separate organization under CNCF umbrella, great. Having possibility to create repositories using some naming patterns, some same governance procedures, like great. What we shouldn't end up is just like some artificial boundaries which will prevent implementing something what will be device specific.
Yeah, NVIDIA already has multiple drivers for their RDMA and for their just like you're saying, Sasha, for Intel. Like I think that's going to be pretty common.
Another thing, I hope long term, not right now, right? So because everybody is experimental, I hope long term, if you really look at those driver implementation, majority code actually is common code. And then push down more and more to the standardized, hopefully.
Yeah, there might be a lot of boilerplate.
Not to ask this one, but I kind of the hope eventually. So there's the more and more doing this process and go run from the community, so we can drive more common code instead. We keep out really big API, and everyone logical behind those implementation, every logic is different. So that's kind of exposure complexity to the user.
Well, there's also on the driver side, there's some things we theoretically want to do that are cross vendor, across driver. So if everybody built using a common framework, that would become a lot easier. I don't know if we certainly would need some common types and interfaces to make that possible. But like you're saying, if we could build it once, why make everybody build it?
But I know there's the urgency for speed up, so trade off.
Just from a practical perspective, just thinking this out. So like what you're proposing here is that anybody who is interested in writing a DRA driver for their emergent device, whether that's a GPU or some other special device yet to be discussed, we would be open to hosting their repo in KSIGs under the Kubernetes umbrella or something like that. That makes sense. But then what comes with that? I think there'd be following questions, like implied there'd be a license associated with that code base. And then kind of the trickiness I would see here is like, what's the test matrix you would want to push onto that? So like, it's not like, in many cases, it's the vendor that would have to be bringing that hardware forward in order to have it testable. And then there's the cross section of operating systems and driver intersection challenges that still exist. How opinionated are you seeing one would want to be or have to be in order to be in this repo with like what they choose to test or not test, or what base images they build from or don't build from? And that I can just see that getting really tricky.
I know.
the vendor itself might choose what they choose to do. So I'm kind of curious if you had a carrot that might get the right flexibility in place, because some of those things, I think, as distribution providers, we all have our hats on where it's like, oh yeah, the base image actually does matter in some cases, or oh, the OS that you test with does matter in these cases. And those problems won't go away, I guess. So
yeah, does anybody know what like gateway does, or even older ingress, like what, was there any qualification? Was there any test matrix beyond? I think we just used Nginx and ingress. Like, I'm just curious, there's a similar problem, right? Like where it's different implementations of services. It's a little bit different because it's like, I mean, it's a slightly different problem, but it rhymes. Like, it'd be interesting to see how much success they've had with that.
I can have, I'm not sure the gateway and ingress, how they test the metrics, but I can bring up this, like the older CRAL and Containerd. Actually, everyone want to have that task metrics initially. So we define what's the acceptance, right? So we defined those acceptance requirement upfront prerequisite actually filter a lot. I remember even like a couple of years ago, I think in this same SIG Node meeting, people pushed me to accept the Fedora and the Debian test and with Containerd and CRAL. And we basically push that to the OS distro. And we said, okay, you need to run those tests. If you satisfy test, then we accept this. So I agree with you, Derek. This is more complicated, even more complicated.
This is more complicated than the runtime, because like, I guess what I'm wondering is if I'm a vendor and I was going to go make this choice. Now, I'm not a hardware vendor, so it's not like a particular well-informed thinking that I would think on this, but I would think that this appeal is saying make your upstream in the KSIG's repo, but you likely would still need to have a corresponding downstream. And just to do image build pipelines to your company's standards or satisfactions, or to do whatever commercialized testing you may or may not do, and or even long-term support that might vary based on what KSIGs does as a practice, or I don't know. Basically, I'm trying to think through, like, does this eliminate the need for a vendor to have a downstream, or not? I think you still probably would. But the positive is clear in that there could be a community to rally around, you know, common code framework and plumbing around, which I think is good. Yeah, I don't know. I'll be curious what people think when exploring.
It can eliminate for the scenarios when the hardware is more or less generally available in one of the biggest CSPs. But if it's some specific hardware which is not available on CSP, we have a problem with the testing.
I feel here's the benefit for those, for both vendor and the community, right? So for vendor, if it's not like the more advanced, more new hardware, new device, with plugging this test actually help them to Kubernetes, make sure the Kubernetes evolve, always can do the pre-test against their hardware. Right, so you are basically benefited from the open source from day one. There's no compatibility issue caused for your device, existing device. So help you and also demonstrate to you community support this one, endorse even to some extent. I'm not sure how this one, how people interpret this one. So then, so they can focus on new device. How to make that it is more advantage and all those kind of things. They can focus that one. They don't need to require, but for the gold and the standard, yeah, not that latest one, so they can benefit from. So this is what I'm thinking about the incentive for vendor, for device vendor. But for community, I also think about there's third thing. So even the downstream as the Kubernetes vendor, I still have to test before this whole thing goes to the customer, but I have the confidence at least the open source carry on conform level of the test, right? So I'm not getting something leveraging test on the open source, then I have to come back reactive mode and come back to open source, say, okay, open source, please, this is after we get. So this is kind of, and everyone build their forked version, and that's caused more problem for community. so then everyone can come back to this one. So it's we upfront, pre-submit and test all those kind of things for every release. We can see that it is compatible with this gold device, which you basically something like that. So that's kind of what I think about is mutual benefit. Of course, we need to define of the prerequisite. I'm not open to support more than 2 or 3, some of those kind of things, but what we support need to have some, also show some marketing, right? So like more user, not marketing. Business is more like user, like majority user on this device, majority user on this. So then as the open source community, and we using that as the sample implementation. So we reduce light overhead for everybody. So that's kind of things, but the benefit for vendor, device vendor, and also Kubernetes vendor. So that's kind of came from.
I guess I could see pushback from others though saying, well, we didn't do this with CSI and we didn't do this with CNI. And what makes DRA different? And isn't the whole point of DRA that hardware vendors can move at a pace independent of Kubernetes? Why do I need to have my code in Kubernetes to be successful with DRA? Like all those counter questions, I think it'd be good to have strong answers to, because if the code was all just together with Cube in the Cube project, like you could argue we wouldn't necessarily need DRA to be as, you know, feature rich and capable as we've pushed it to. Like you could just have had the code more natively tied. So I don't know, it seems like a bit of a catch-22 no matter how we look at it, but be curious to see what folks think.
Yes.
I think it'll come down to vendors opting into it, right? Like I know like some vendors have their own roadmaps that don't necessarily align with the community roadmaps, and there's then pushback that okay, our PMs haven't prioritized that. So will they be willing to losing some of that control over the project? Will be another factor.
Well, control is not a problem.
Yeah.
Control is usually not a problem. It's sometimes it's a dependencies on private APIs, which might have like not so good licenses to access the hardware details. And second is about this whole CI infrastructure. If you're talking about NVIDIA GPUs, which is widely available, it's fine. But if we are talking, let's say, some specific like FPGA device, you simply cannot test it without either vendor bringing their own worker or own data center where this CI workers can run. So I would be happy to use this public stuff, but how to verify what device is actually working, not only APIs of the drivers.
Yeah.
So Don, like, what are the next steps? I feel like we are supportive, and then we can need to start some support.
Let me follow up with because I also asked Kevin to follow up with he internal, right? So that's the vendor, and Alexandra also is represent the vendor in our community. So maybe come back to this one is that we can follow up on this, and I also will follow up with the CNCF and the figure out is the CNCF. We have the product manager, right? So if I may remember, CNCF.
Well, we have to figure out whether it's a CNCF thing or whether it's a K6 thing.
Yes,
I think
yes,
there's
yes.
probably a few. If it's K6, then literally it's up to steering or SIG or somebody.
Exactly. So I already bring this to some of the steering committee members' attention, awareness, not attention, just awareness. And so haven't get to the attention stage yet. So I'm going to summarize what we discussed, what do we think about, what do we concern. So then we can come back this. How about that? I know we definitely cannot reach a consensus today. And then there's the open question need to iron out too.
Yep. Sounds like a plan. Thanks, Don.
Thanks.
So we have a couple more topics. I'm thinking, Peter, if you're okay, if we go with Harshal's topic first, given the upcoming PRR one. Harshal, you want to talk about C groups V1 cap?
Yeah, sure. So if you remember, we started with the cgroup v1 deprecation, and then we got the community feedback, and we got to know how many people still depend on it or will keep on depending on it. So we switched to, instead of deprecating it, we switched to just having a maintenance mode. That is just to let people know that cgroup v1 is something that we will not be adding features to, and only critical bugs and whatnot. So initially, since we were thinking of removing the support, we had feature gates to the KEP. So that now we have time, we go through alpha, beta, and GA. And now that we have just a maintenance mode declaration, in that KEP, I have consolidated everything in this one thought 31 thing where you have some warnings going out, and then we will have some minor refactoring and some test cases, mainly just to make sure that our jobs run on cgroup v2. I see a comment by Sergey recently that he would like to have the feature gates back, and I completely understand that having something feature gated will allow us to properly manage our test infrastructure, making sure the jobs don't run on cgroup v1. However, that creates a problem where people will need to take an extra step to make sure cgroup v1 is usable for them. So I just want to bring everyone's attention that what is the approach we would take. I, on one hand, agree with Sergey, having feature gate will help, but at the same time, that would be quite a task for the users to make sure the cgroup v1 keeps running on their systems smoothly. And that's the reason we are not even not deprecating it, just maintenance mode. So we need to reach a consensus, and that's the reason I want to bring it up here. What approach should we take?
I was thinking.
So
go ahead.
Sorry, my question was, I haven't. I'm just jumping in, so I don't know. I might have missed some things. We can have a feature gate that defaults to on, and how would that be different? And then later we can, isn't that our usual deprecation process? Like, in other words, we're not deprecating, but like, I guess if we're not deprecating, is it a feature gate or is it just a configuration option? Which is different, right? Sergey, what were you thinking with I'm just reading your comment here. What are you thinking? Like, we don't want behavior to change when people upgrade or something, right? It has to stay the same. They have to explicitly turn this off, I would think.
Either way, like my biggest question is how we will make sure that CI is not adding more cgroup v1 tests, and if it's disable, like explicit disable allowed, like we can have a feature gate that disables cgroup v1 support, and it also works. Then on all the CI jobs, we'll just say that cgroup v1 disabled and run with that, and like then it will be clearly, like you will clearly see that this test is running on cgroup v2, this test is running on cgroup v1. Default failure, like if you run on cgroup v1 and like by default it fails unless you set some environment variable or feature gate, will be easier on CI, because like this way you guarantee that every new job will be running on cgroup v2 unless you explicitly opt in on cgroup v1. But the way to disable it as a reverse order also works.
I guess like we decided to go softer when we said we'll say maintenance mode first and then do deprecation later, right? But if you're already adding additional flags, then like aren't the lines between deprecation and maintenance getting blurred a bit? Just thinking out loud, like any more thoughts?
So maintenance mode. So was our original discussion like, oh, I remember the original discussion from a few weeks ago was like, we'll just say it's in maintenance mode effectively, but it's still there. I think what I'm hearing, and I may be wrong, like I said, I haven't read any of this. What I'm hearing is that maybe it would be good to have a configuration option to be able to turn it off, and we can't do that today. Is that accurate? We can't turn it off today?
No, there's nothing to turn it off.
Okay, so I would see this as a new feature, and the feature is the ability to turn it off. And And maybe in 3 years, we say there's another feature which is changing the default from on to off. But like it has to be managed super carefully so we don't break anybody. So yeah, that's kind of annoying, but that we our CI jobs we have to go and make sure. But we can put some check in the GitHub actions or something that look and make sure that new jobs don't have it enabled or something like we have to make sure our users don't accidentally break themselves on upgrade. So,
Right, so
I don't think feature gates. I don't know if the feature gate, the team that you know manages that is going to be happy for using feature gates for without it being a real deprecation. So it might almost be more of a feature, which is adding these config flags. That's what I would think. Like it's not the purpose of feature gates is to provide user control to the extent of like just a configuration option. It's to move it through a cycle.
So if I got this correctly, we are saying that we will add a config flag to kubelet, which would by default, even if you don't set it, allow cgroup v1 to exist, right? That way it won't break other users.
Yeah, and then in CI, we can use that flag to ensure if the kubelet exits if something new is being added to I mean, so it can be used in the CI and CI for that, and deprecation we can do with the feature gate later, right?
Yeah, deprecation we are not even talking about, right? Not just maintenance mode.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that clarifies it. So I'll just add add the configuration flag, and that by default it doesn't change anything for the any user. One more question. So do we do this everything in 1.31, or should we split this in alpha, beta, and the graduation GA?
I mean, feature flag will be like can be introduced in single release. We don't need progression for config option.
All right.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I don't see why we need to stretch it out across multiple releases unless we are not confident about the approach.
Yeah, one consideration here is config option will be temporary, temporary for a couple of years. I wonder if environment variable will be a better option, which is non-traditional, but sometimes we use it still.
All right, makes sense. Thanks. That will be all, Manal.
Right. Thanks, Harshil. Peter, we have 7 minutes. Do you think we can cover your topic?
Yeah, this one should be quick. We talked about this at the SIG Node CI meeting. This is an issue that someone brought up. Basically making the claim, and it makes sense to me that like the image GC high threshold, like in percentage of disk, should be less than the eviction threshold, or 100 minus the eviction threshold. And so they have an issue there. I think the rationale is legit. I was wondering, it seems like because we would end up basically tightening the validation for, the kubeless configuration, it sounds to me like something that would be best done with a feature gate if we were to go down this route. And I think that they have added a feature gate, but I just wanted to check with everyone that they think that this, that I'm like Yuju and I are correct in, suggesting a feature gate, or rather Yuju, I think, mentioned we should talk about a SIG Node actually, but that I was correct in mentioning we should have it be gated by feature, and or whether this approach feels correct.
I'm not sure if everyone has read through the issue. You want to quickly describe?
Yeah, basically, if the and I'm sort of catching up a little bit again because I looked at this last week and thought to add it, but forgot to review it a little bit again. But basically, if the eviction threshold, like 100 minus the eviction threshold, is lower than the image GC threshold, then we hit a disk eviction at the same time. We can hit disk eviction at the same time the image GC kicks in. And this just, like, the way that the kubelet handles this is like, you know, going through eviction of pods, even though there are images that could potentially be garbage collected. And so I think the rationale is that, like, we shouldn't be disturbing work. We should, like, clean up what we have access to first before we start disturbing workloads. And the way to enforce that programmatically is just make sure that the image GC threshold is lower than the eviction threshold. So image GC kicks in first. That's basically what I understand it to be.
Yeah, and I remember we discussed on CI group that suggestion was to add a validation check on arguments, like on the configuration options, and check if this threshold, like one threshold is lower than another threshold by certain value. And concern was that it will break upgrades for some customers who misconfigured it. So options really are either automatically correct that and report the warnings that we automatically corrected those thresholds, or break this backward compatibility and like just have a release nodes open. So I think that's what we wanted to discuss on this meeting.
Or we can add a feature gate to increase this validation, and then people can slowly opt into it.
I think either warning or feature gate sounds good to me. Don, your thoughts?
I'm still thinking. I'm thinking about feature gate, maybe a little bit overkill, but I totally see what's your concern. But on the other hand, honestly, we are doing. I think this is this change is a little bit compared to the way before we reach off the limit, reach after certain things, we evict the pod. So previously we evict the pod, we kill the running process. This will change actually is before you kill, actually we protect you, prevent you kill. We evict some of the garbage image first. I remember last week we have some discussing. I think that's we kill, and the people saw this kind of problem and have the more complex proposal. This is a little bit related to that one, and I think this behavior actually is from user perspective, I do know this is the behavior change. So but I also think this behavior change actually is good. It's better than existing today. Today is basically you reach the limit. I got to kill you. Instead, we are delaying this reach the limit by managing of those died of the image, right? So died the containers image or something like that. Less frequently using image. So yeah, if we want to using feature gate, just go ahead. But I just feel like a little bit overkill. So that's why
I think there may be real customers using that, because if customer knows that they definitely don't have any images that they want to clean up, there is no way to disable garbage collection. The only way to disable garbage collection to effectively say that your threshold is 100%. So this is a way you don't run garbage collection, don't waste cycles on it if you guarantee you have no images to clean up. And if we will hit customer like that who wanted to disable garbage collector, now we just like don't allow them to disable garbage collector, then that may be like source of complaints. And if you want to find out how many customers like that, then we can go with feature gate and collect feedback on that. That may be an option. Maybe we'll need to have a way to disable garbage collection as well if we introduce this option.
Yep, that makes sense. If someone wants to disable it, we should give them a way.
So I think we're about at time. I think I'll suggest to them to go for a feature gate, to open a KEP probably, so that we can kind of discuss this a little bit further. But that broadly, you know, we're not really opposed to this. Just, you know, let's make sure we get all of the sort of details right in the KEP. Cool. All right, thank you.
Right.
Thanks.
Good. All right, thanks for joining, folks. See you all next week. Bye now.
Bye-bye.